So what is going to happen in the real estate world in 2026? Will those interest rates finally go down, making housing affordable again? Well, probably yes to the first, very unlikely on the second part. Will housing supply catch up to demand? No. Will inflation increase at a high pace? Definitely. Will rents go up or down? I'm seeing mostly flat. But I guess I should actually try to prove all of this. Usually that's the whole punchline of these videos. But I think it's more important that I show you why, and just as importantly, what do you actually do with these combination of factors anyway? Like, okay, let's say I'm an oracle and everything I said was actually right, which who knows? What would you even do with it? I think that's the better question, especially if you're someone who's serious about real estate like me. Because if you don't know, I'm the owner of Fort Lowell Realty, and we manage in the realm of 4,000 rentals across Phoenix and Tucson, Arizona. And so I see a whole lot going on all the time with rentals and sales and everything having to do with apartment complexes, single family homes, plexes, things like that. So, first thing I want to do to help show you why I'm thinking what I'm thinking is I'm going to show you the data. And while I show you the data, I'm also going to be showing you and telling you about my actual experience out here because 4,000 rentals really gives me my own data set, which really matters nowadays when data maybe isn't being made like it used to. Let's start with the tenants. What is a tenant? A tenant in America is, I would call it the average American. And the average, knowing how the average American is actually doing nowadays is a big deal because it's still a consumer-led economy. Okay, so how is the average American doing? Okay, let's start there. So this is a map of America, and this is the current unemployment rate. Okay, Arizona is at 4.3, which is the average across the country. Some parts are getting it worse. Michigan, California, I think DC over here was 6.7. I think that's the highest. That's probably Doge. Okay, so overall unemployment going up a little bit, but people like to sound the alarms. So here, I'm going to make myself smaller here. Let's get more into the data instead of looking at me. I'm always into that idea. So look at this. Here's a chart of unemployment over time. I'm using Arizona because that's where I'm from, but also this chart's pretty normal across the country. It's really not a big deal. Is it changing the world? No. Is it going up? Yes. Is going up bad? Yes. But is it that bad? No. So the other part people will say, and this is a valid thing against the unemployment rate. This is a good critique. Um, it says, okay, well, that's just people currently applying for jobs. If you give up completely, then you're not unemployed anymore. You're just in the wind, I guess. So I like to look at labor force participation rate, which includes everyone in the ages of a normal labor force age bands. Okay. And as you can see, it has gone down. But has it gone down a lot? It's gone down about 4 or 5%, which is notable when you have an entire country. That is a lot of people. Um, I think the real reason for this is actually just our aging demographics. A lot of boomers are retiring as they should. In fact, I would actually argue that if people, in their 60s, 70s, if none of them are retiring, then that actually might be a worse sign of how things are going, if you think about it. So overall, I'm not too concerned about employment for the tenant as well overall. It's a little harder, but it's not dreadful. And most of them, especially the ones that are of a normal age to work, are. Here's the next chart. I don't love this chart, but this is a wage growth tracker. This is supposed to be showing, okay, this is their average American's income. This is their expenses. Are they getting richer? Are they getting poorer when you add in everything? And they're saying that the average worker is getting richer by 3.7% a year. I don't know about that. And I'm going to explain why in a minute here. But let me show you some more data. Let me just throw more data at you because you need to know which way's actually up without all the drama. Because everyone dramatizes all these numbers with no context because they need to make their money off a headline. Luckily, I make my money off of real estate, so no drama here. Okay, this is saying, which one's this? The percentage change of consumer price index. So, like a bundle of goods. A lot of the times people try to sell you that this is pure inflation, which is not. This is consumer price index. So, items have gone up 2.7% for a bundle of goods, like consumer staples and energy. I think energy and Arizona went up a little bit less than this. Arizona's a slightly cheaper state than others. It went up 2.3. Yeah, and energy went up 4.2. And consumer staples went up 3.8. I think a lot of that's normal everywhere. Um, I I'm a broker, so I'm only going to comment so much on things outside of my true area of expertise. But I don't understand how energy goes up when the price of gas goes down. But I guess there's other sources. Okay, so overall, it's saying that costs are going up a little bit, but still, it says their net tenants, residents are getting richer. But again, I don't think so. And here's one of the, to me, ways to prove that. Because if people are getting richer, right, then they have the ability to save. They have the ability to save money. But people's savings rates are going down. See that line? So this is disposable personal income, outlays, and savings. And this shows their personal savings as a percentage of their income, basically. So right now, Americans are saving 3.5% of their money. So you make $100, you save $3.50. It's down from $3.70. And this number used to be way higher post COVID, mostly because no one had anything to do and people were getting those stimulus checks. So, and I'm really focusing on this savings rate. One is a way to verify that other chart. But just as importantly, too, is if savings rates go down, and this is especially important to tenants and people who have rentals, especially for tenants who have, maybe cheaper units. If you have no savings, you can't afford to move. Moving isn't free. You have a moving truck, you're probably going to lose some money on your security deposit. You're going to have just costs. And if you really don't have anything, you can't move. Okay, so think about that. Remember that. I'm going to come back to that. Okay, but here's another thing that's I think interesting about tenants. The average American's credit score is 715, which is actually a pretty decent score. It's gone down um, from 718, but that was also a bit of a peak. So I guess people got really good. Well, that's also when the savings rates were super high. But wow, somehow in 2019 it was worse. Huh. It's almost like as a culture, the average American has gotten more responsible because a 9-10 point increase is something, especially when you're in the 700s already, because it gets harder and harder, really, I think, to keep going above it once you get around the 720 number. So overall, they're actually being pretty responsible, the average American. But here's the thing: is it all a ticking time bomb? Is the tenant about to explode? Well, in this chart, it shows you how much credit card debt they have. And this is a good thing to look at. But it is also the most misinterpreted thing that I see on the news, and they love to use this to scare people, okay? And it really bothers me how people use this. So, and this is the amount of credit card debt. And as you can see, it has increased over time a pretty fair amount. And overall, I'd say that's not a great thing. But a thing that people are not bringing into their way of thinking enough when you're reading these charts because is you're not factoring in inflation. You're not factoring in inflation, and we're used to not doing this, and this is like everyone, aside from some spikes in the past. There was inflation spikes, but for decades it's been pretty calm. But now it's gone up, so people aren't used so when they see this, they think it's bad, but they go, oh, what about inflation? What is it when you account for inflation? Boom. Here's the inflation adjusted version. Credit card debt hasn't moved. It peaked around 2000, what is that? 8? Yeah, that makes sense. And then it dropped like a rock because people basically learned their lesson and then they hung out around this area and then didn't get loans they shouldn't have on home loans on top of that that they shouldn't have. Something like that, I think, is what happened. So, the average American is not loading themselves with credit card debt. They're just doing basically the same old thing. It's creeping up. It's not great. It's tight. And if you're really looking at what I'm telling you, it's tight, but it's not necessarily worse. Okay, this is my wonderful picture of tenants because I want to bring all this together. So overall, I'd say the average tenant is, where's my summary of them? Oh, I don't need it. Overall, they're healthy, but it's tight. They don't have anymore. They don't have much savings. I mean, 3.5%, that's not a lot of savings. And you have to remember that's the average American. So when you get to the cheaper rents, the cheaper than average market rents, it's probably less. Their credit score is good. So and they're already being responsible, which means I don't see a whole lot more, less wonderful people would say juice that you can take from them. So to me, they're maxed out, but they're handling it. So so what I would say to a lot of people who are renting, and maybe you don't love this answer from me, but this is what I'm seeing. You should not arbitrarily be increasing your rents because they can probably afford what they have, but you can't just bring it up higher for no reason. Counterpoint, they're not they're not down and out either. So you don't necessarily have to decrease your rents for existing tenants either. And I'm going to loop back on that because that's going to be a big difference. Um, and if you're just watching this and you're a tenant, I guess you could learn from this. Um, so let me show you some more charts. So that's the average American. They're scraping by. They're not doomed. Can't go up either on them. That's a tenant. Let's start talking about inflation and interest rates, okay? Because this is actually a big reason why I haven't published my 2026 video yet, because so much has happened in January alone that has affected inflation and interest rates because of all the moves that have been happening. You've probably seen it in the news. And I want to start with this. The stated inflation rate is 2.677%. Raise your hand if you believe that. I'm going to put my hand down. And that's going to be important moving forward. So let's look at some other rates. This one's definitely true. The mortgage rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage is 6.1%. Now, I don't have a chart for this, but it's been between 7 and 6% for a while now, like a year and a half, couple years. It hasn't really moved, even though we've had a bunch of rate reductions from the Fed. And one quick note I want people to understand is because you reduce the interest rate, which is the federal funds rate, that does not directly reduce your 30-year fixed mortgage. They're not direct. It is not one for one. It's not one for one. So if it goes down 0.25% of the federal funds rate, you are not necessarily getting 0.25% less on your mortgage. Okay, that's for the newbies. Just want to make that clear because if you don't get that, the rest of what I say is not going to make sense. Okay, here's one of the reasons why I had to pause on releasing this video. It's Trump's Fed pick, Kevin Warsh. No one saw this guy coming. Everyone thought this would be going a very different way. And so I had to look into who this guy was. I had to spend hours listening to his talks over the years. And I have a couple of clips of him that I want you to listen to first, so you know that I'm not just putting words in his mouth, because he's a new guy to most people. This is his position on quantitative tightening and quantitative easing. What that means is quantitative easing is basically where the Fed buys more stuff like bonds and treasuries. It increases its called balance sheet. This adds liquidity into the market. When you add liquidity, that's a fancy word for cash, into the market, you make it to where loans can essentially be cheaper. Remember Macro 101 from college. If you increase supply and demand remains the same, then your price goes down, right? So if you increase the supply of cash, the price to buy a loan, think of it as the interest rate, goes down. That's a lot of the one of the justifications for quantitative easing. Quantitative tightening is the opposite, where you sell all those bonds and those treasuries and you don't put them back, and there's less cash in the entire market. Okay, so the Fed can buy tons, many billions, hundreds of billions of stuff. Okay, so here's what he has to say about things like that.
My recommendation is a smaller balance sheet, takes the Fed back to a more manageable size, a more serious job. And interestingly, if you can have a smaller balance sheet, you can have lower interest rates.
Yeah, so you'll notice what I said and what he said are kind of the opposite. And he says the word interestingly, I think because a lot of the room is confused by what he said. And I am confused by what he said. I'm not a full-time economist, so I'm not going to claim I know everything, but that does fundamentally confuse me. So he's for but whatever. He's for quantitative tightening. Everyone, because the Fed just started doing quantitative easing, so this is like a reversal. If he's actually sticks to what he says, what he has said historically.
But the world's better off if they think they're doing their level best.
Oh, this is about Fed independence, because it comes up a lot, and I think it's going to be relevant. Here's what he thinks on Fed independence.
Call balls and strikes. But the operational conduct of monetary policy doesn't mean that the Fed shouldn't be criticized. Central bankers should not be pampered princes. If Chairman Hill and his colleagues think that we're doing a terrible job at the central bank, they should be able to call it out. Same thing with the president. As a matter of fact, I'd rather the president call out his consternation with the central bank to the world than do what used to happen in generations past. I don't mean to be invoking President Reagan again, but being summoned to the Oval Office for a little quiet to-do about what you're doing and right. Central banks were created so that politicians would have someone to blame for this. None of...
Okay, that only means so much, but I thought it was an interesting tidbit. Okay, so overall, he's saying he wants to lower interest rates, but he also wants quantitative tightening. And in some other clips, because there's so many clips, I watched this guy for hours on his interviews. He also has a big difference in how he is going to operate from Jerome Powell. So Jerome Powell has always been team, just keep consistently putting money into the market so that we don't have a big recession. Just consistently do it. So it just stays level and you slowly increase the balance. Kevin Warsh, in a different interview, said he thinks the Fed should only be responding in times of emergency, and that's why it was originally created. Now the Fed just casually buys things all the time. So his philosophy is do nothing until there's an emergency. And then he said, basically, I think the word was overwhelming, like overwhelming firepower. So essentially, it looks like his preference is he wants there to be a crash and then he does a big bailout, kind of like 2008, which I believe, because he's been on the Fed for a very long time, he voted for the huge bailouts that happened in 2008, which if you're going to push quantitative tightening and you love the idea of, I don't know if the word love the idea, but you're pro the idea of only step in during emergencies, then that basically means he's angling things for a stock market crash. Just, I mean, when you put together what he says, that's what I hear. I'm just one guy. We're very new to this. Who knows if he changes it all and just, does what other people tell him to do? I don't know. But let's this isn't political. This is just what I'm seeing and what he's saying, and I'm saying it back to you. Okay. But what does this do for housing prices? Let's get back to real estate here. How does all this affect it? Well, there's another very interesting thing that's happening, and Trump just announced it a week or two ago, and it's this slide. And Trump really pushed for this. Fannie and Freddie Mac are going to buy $200 billion worth of mortgage bonds, mortgage-backed securities. Okay, which means that will directly reduce the interest rates of mortgages from that 6.1% to something lower. That would, because what you're doing is you are reducing the risk for people when they buy these loans. Because most of the time, people who buy your loans, banks, individual brokers, they hold it for a second and then they sell it to groups like Fannie and Freddie who are like a backstop. And so, in my opinion, I'm putting this together. Again, this is very early. The Fed is a government entity, even though it's independent, but it is government money that they're using to buy the bonds and the treasuries. Fannie and Freddie are also government held. They're a pseudo mix, public and private, but those profits, a lot of those profits, have to go back to the American taxpayer. Both the Fed and Fannie and Freddie have to give their profits to the U.S. Treasury. Okay? So you got money here from the Fed, money here from Fannie and Freddie. If you have quantitative tightening, if Kevin Warsh does what he has historically liked to say, then he's going to reduce the balance sheet, at least until it breaks. But he reduces the balance sheet. Where'd that money go? Well, the profits go to the Treasury. Fannie and Freddie have to buy $200 billion worth of stuff. So that money, it might not be direct like this, but I feel like it's kind of the idea of you're moving money around and more directly, instead of trying to pump the markets, you're trying to juice the real estate market, which kind of makes sense given Trump's background as being in real estate. It's something he's used to thinking about. That's my theory. Take it for what it's worth. But because I am just a real estate broker, I have there it is. I have a journal, right? Because I went to a 2-day long event at AEI, American Enterprise Institute. And these are the PhDs of real estate. They're the ones who make a lot of policy around real estate and other things, but they're pretty well known in the real estate realm. And so I went to their event and I just listened to them for a couple of days and I asked questions and I got these notes, and this is the kind of stuff that you can't just get by Googling around and getting a bunch of charts and listening to talking heads like you'd get anywhere else. So I used these notes and a lot of what they said to help develop some other parts of what I'm going to talk about now, and I'll reference it here and there throughout. Okay. So we just talked about inflation, interest rates, and we've gone over tenants. Now I want to go into what is the situation for people who own real estate. Will prices increase? Okay, how much? What's the situation with all of that? Okay, so let's start with the owner. Owners have home buyers just regular home buyers, have an average credit score of 735, which is a good credit score. So people who are buying homes have at least a good credit score, which usually means they're relatively solid financially. Let's look at delinquency rates of existing properties. Okay. People are always wondering, oh, is it all going to fall apart? Nope. It's pretty normal. And actually, I'm going to take this moment to take what they said to debunk a huge theory that people have about delinquency rates and that destroying the market. Now, you have to remember 2008 was different and they had a bunch of ninja loans and they ruined everything. But here's an interesting tidbit on foreclosures and how that affects home prices. This is what they AEI PhDs said. Wage affordability, so basically people being able to afford their home that they own, does affect foreclosure rates, which is not a big revelation, but it doesn't affect the price. So foreclosure rates can go up, but the price of homes don't necessarily go down. I guess that could only happen if it happened in mass with people who shouldn't have it at all, like the ninja loans. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So even if, because people love taking this chart and freaking out, I remember when it went from here to here, there were like 1,000 news articles about how we were all doomed. And prices went up, home prices went up. So don't be duped by this. This is one of the most common, we're going to dupe you charts. Okay? Foreclosure rates can go up, but that doesn't mean price goes down. In fact, in places where homes are less affordable, which makes foreclosure rates more likely, rents are more likely to go up because renters can't afford them. So it actually ends up being a place where people who own rental properties are more entrenched and make a higher return. That's another interesting tidbit. Well, let's keep going. Let's look at the housing stock and what housing will do. So this is housing units completed. As you can see, new homes, it's starting to dip down from the peak in, what was that, August of 2024? And I'd agree with that. It's all been dropping a fair amount. A lot of it is because material costs have gone up. The market is softening. People's savings rates are going down. Inflation has been high. And tariffs have made material costs, especially wood and other things like metals, it's all going up. So there's less returns to be had on building homes. Higher risk, lower reward right now. And here's the permit side of it. Permits are going down as well. So there's not going to be some huge jump in housing stock coming in 6 months either. Here's the Arizona version, same story, huge drop in August 2025. And then it got a little bit more normalized. But it has these notable spike downs now. So that's not necessarily speeding up either. And look, it's not like we're at a heightened rate. It's kind of been the same story. It's been forever. We're like dead middle. So will supply reach demand? No, it won't. That's why I said it's just not going to happen. Okay, here's the only chart that to me shows something, and this is more Arizona specific, but this is something you can look for in any market. Is look at this. This is months of supply and absorption rate. So right now we're looking at home sales because looking at apartment complex sales and everything, it's a little fuzzy. The data isn't as good. It's all kind of trust me, bro. Like when they get the data, uh, all of it is like that. So months of supply. What that means is if you had 100 houses for sale in your market at any given time, and if you were to freeze that, no one else can sell their homes, and for some reason no one freaked out and bought them, how long would it take to sell those homes? So how long to sell what you have on the shelf? Well, the higher that gets, the month of supply, the more of a buyer's market it is because your stuff is sitting on the shelf. So as you can see, it was starting to creep up a lot. and then it went down a bit, and then it started creeping back up, especially towards the end of the year because there was a bit of a glut in supply. There was a lot of stuff coming up that was happening, but no one was buying it until recently. And then you have absorption rate, which is where people, it's an inverse relationship. Once the supply goes down, absorption rate usually almost always goes up, which means how quickly that's actually getting absorbed, how quickly that's going. So this is a good sign. I think one of the reasons why no one was buying is all those interest rates were just kept happening. And for the people, but so, which is actually a huge mistake that I'm going to go over here in a minute in the suggestions of what you can do about all this. But to me, this shows through just huge numbers, like human behavior being wrong about how real estate works. So I actually find this chart kind of funny in a weird way. So, okay, that's where we are on all this. That's that's all the data I'm going to show you. What do we actually do about this? Okay, let me see. Here's one scenario. If mortgage interest rates stay the same, real estate prices will increase, but the increase will not keep pace with inflation. This is one of the summaries that I'm trying to give you right now, and AEI said the same. If interest rates remain the same, as in they don't drop, at least on the mortgage-backed security interest rates, like your mortgage interest rate stays the same, the real estate as a class of equity will not keep pace with inflation. And that's actually a big thing, I'm telling you, casually. A lot of people would make a whole video about that. I think that is one of the huge reasons why Trump has been pushing, and he even said in a video that he wants the prices to go up, is because with heightened inflation, it turns into, okay, home prices are going to keep going up. A lot of people want them to go down. I understand that. But with given how heightened inflation is, it's and given there's no foreclosures, and even if it did, wouldn't matter. It's not going to happen. There's not a huge drop coming. There's not huge supply coming. There's none of that's happening. So home prices are going to go up. But are the value of homes going to go up? That's why I said in the very beginning of this video, yes and no. So if this Kevin Warsh Fed pick from Trump and Trump get their way, I think they're going to make it to where the mortgage interest rates actually do go down, which means real estate as an equity will remain competitive compared to all the other equity buckets. If you don't know what I'm talking about, other equity buckets are like stocks. It could also be precious metals. Some people buy Bitcoin. Those are all different equities, right? And basically everyone right now is in a race to at least pace with inflation, and if they're feeling really competitive, outpace inflation so that they actually can make some money. Okay, that's where we are. We're in an equity race. Given all the politics, at least short term, for the next couple of years, if Trump gets his way, real estate will remain a competitive source when we're just talking about inflation in this sort of inflation equity race game. Okay? I'm not talking about cash flow. The other big part that we want to go into here is, let's see. Let's go back, but let's say you own the property already. You're not looking to prospect. Oh, wait, let me say one last thing on this. So, because of the rates dropping so quickly, is likely to continue to happen, at least politically. That seems to be the push. It makes sense, and that's why I'm making fun of this chart. It makes sense to actually buy property now, not later. Because if you buy it later when the interest rates are low, all that happens is price increases because the monthly payment goes down for every dollar that you're basically paying for the house. So if you find a good property, if it makes sense as a cash flow or even just to live in, I would buy it now. if you can afford it and have it make sense, because the prices are not going to go down. Um, so here's what's really interesting. If you were to buy it now and the interest rates go down, then what you do is you just refi, but you locked in the cheaper price now. You see what I'm saying? The price didn't inflate. So if you're going to buy, I would do it before all these additional cuts are likely to happen. Um, no clue if there's going to be some huge crash or anything. I'm not commenting on that. I'm just saying that's how you play interest rates. Okay. So let's go to the rental side of my suggestions of what we can do here. Because again, Fort Lowell Realty, we manage about 4,000 doors. Um, let's remember, tenants as a whole cannot really have their rent increase arbitrarily. They're also not necessarily dying, so you don't have to decrease it arbitrarily. So, but because their savings are relatively low, if you're vacant, then you probably have to give them a deal. See what I'm saying? So here's how you do that correctly. First thing you want to do is keep the tenants you have. Days on market for rentals are probably going to go up because of everything I'm talking about. It's going to be harder to rent, and you're going to have to give more concessions than we're used to, because for the past decade, it's been relatively easy to rent places because the market was just so hot and it was always getting better since 2008. So it was always good and competitive. It's not a buyer's market or a tenant's market yet, but we're slowly getting there. And in places where they did overbuild, um, like downtown Phoenix, or if you happen to be next to another Pulte huge uh, housing subdivision, then you now have to compete a little bit with that. So you want to keep them. So what you want to do is you want to have your property be maintained well. You want to give them a good place, make them happy. And a big thing you want to do is, if you're getting a property management company like mine, you need to make sure that the property management company handles their maintenance really well. Okay? Because you start the relationship with a tenant in a few ways. One, when you meet them. Two, when you actually move them in, and that's usually when they're really happy. Um, and almost all of them are giving you that 5-star review. To me, those are the cheap reviews. But the real review, in the real time, you really solidify your relationship with a tenant, is when something in that house or apartment complex inevitably breaks, and how well your property management company handles it. Okay? So if it breaks, they go, hey, it broke, which is an expectation normal people have. But then if it takes you a month and then you half fix it, well, now they don't like this place. They don't like you. They're fighting you every step of the way on everything. It's a bad relationship. They're likely to move more quickly, which means you have higher turnover costs. Your place is sitting vacant. All bad things. So what I did as a company, and when I took over Tucson years ago, is I was like, we need to just make maintenance the part that people love instead of the part that people hate, which is usually the thing everybody hates. And so take a look at this. This is our Google reviews. We're at a 4.3 now in Tucson. In Phoenix and Scottsdale and the Mesa Gilbert office, we're at like a 4.7 to 4.9, which are all branches I started. Um, but as you can see, we've like 180'd it, and you'll see that a lot of these reviews are for maintenance. This is talking about maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. And I can just like do this. Maintenance. They like the manager. That's good too. Maintenance. Replace. Maintenance. And you'll notice that it's all been 5 stars. Oh, one's mad at me. Something about an RV though. Yeah, I wouldn't let you park an RV in most places either. Sometimes they're just mad. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is maintenance, is my point. And that, aside from everything else, good management, everything else obviously important. But I found is the most critical way of keeping tenants. Okay, because that's when you really prove yourself. When things go wrong, what do you do? Right? It makes sense. So be sure to look for that moving forward so that you don't have to do this next part, which is rent a vacant unit, which is also inevitable, especially if you have an apartment complex, because sometimes people just move. So what are you going to do? What you're going to do is you're going to have to give incentives, but you don't give them the first month cheaply. This is a thing even veteran property management companies do not understand. They don't get it. They do it wrong. Um, Even with my own rentals, I learned this the hard way. I was like, oh yeah, we'll do half a month security deposit over 2 months. That way I get the full security deposit, right? Well, good luck actually collecting that. I collected the full security deposit when I split it out over 2 to 3 months, like once or twice. You end up not getting it. And then what happens because this person couldn't save enough to move is they're usually people who, they tend to cut corners. And so it's just like, it doesn't go well most of the time. There we go. It doesn't go well most of the time. So you need to attract tenants who think more long term, who have the ability to save, and they still can save. So it's not like these tenants don't exist. So what I like to do is I give them the benefits in month 2 and/or 3. So we go, hey, you got to pay everything up front before you move in. You just do. But then we're going to give you a break on the second month, and we're going to give you a rental break on the third month. And then that tenant, the good tenant, goes, oh, okay, well, if I budget, keyword budget, it's all going to work out in the end for me. It's going to be good. Instead of the person who's like, how do I get through today? What am I going to do today to fix all my problems? Which is, of course, impossible. You end up with a whole lot of people running and not paying their rent, and then you end up with a lot of bad debt and a unit that more often than not, they find a way to wreck in a month or two. So don't do that. That is something a lot of because it also shows you don't understand the tenants. You don't understand a whole lot of things. But we've been doing this for, I mean, this is a family company. We've been doing this for many decades. So that's how you do that. Okay, for this market. Another thing, let me go back to maintenance one more time because it's such a big deal. Maintenance, no matter what you do over a 5 year span, ends up costing you more than the management fee, usually significantly. It's just how it is. Um, unless you're undermining the value of your property, in which case you're creating a time bomb for it to all fall apart. Um, but we are introducing a flat rate sheet for really basic maintenance line items. And this is something that can only happen because our company has so much scale to it and so much infrastructure and so many things that we're able to double check and so much support admin. So it makes it to where if it's something really simple, like turn something on in winter, turn something off in summer, um, garage, recalibrate the garage remote, recalibrate this, recalibrate that. There's still dozens and dozens of these little things. What happens a lot of the time is you get nickeled and dimed for these things at a very high cost because the maintenance techs can say, oh, well, it took an hour. And then you get charged at least $60 an hour. Some of them charge 70, 80, $90 an hour now. 90 is pretty high, but I've seen it. Um, so instead, we flat rate it and we're like, hey, that's $20, like 15, $20, a lot of this stuff. And the reason why smaller management companies can't do it is because there's more oversight to that. And actually, just as importantly, then there's not enough business for them that they can guarantee to where they can keep a good, the saying, everyone's looking for a good handyman? Well, good handymen are looking for companies like mine that will give them good work consistently. And if you're not able to give them that, then they leave. So I am able to enforce things like this, is what I'm trying to tell you. Just because someone has it doesn't mean they can actually enforce it and keep good maintenance tax. Totally different things. Also, because a thing to look out for with if this is primarily for my clients, but it goes on YouTube, so I sometimes make this stuff a little more general. So if you're in a completely different state or whatever, if your management company is owned by a private equity firm, they're probably not going to do this because they usually bought it with debt, the whole firm, and now they got to juice the thing and just take as much revenue as they can. And usually they do that with silly fees and costs, so they're never going to do this. So look out if there's been big acquisitions. And also, publicly traded companies kind of have the same attitude. So just look out. You need someone that's been around a long time and doesn't have any debt. So you're not getting like unnecessarily greedy to where you're not thinking long term anymore. You're thinking short term, which real estate's a long term game. So that's not what you're looking for. Okay, so that's the maintenance side. That's turnover. And that's the rates. At a high level, those are the main things to look out for. Keep your properties well maintained if you have them. If you're gonna buy, did it do that? If you're gonna buy and you're not, you know, and it's a good property, it works for you, you're gonna hold long term. In the case of simply interest rates alone, and you believe they're gonna go down, you buy it sooner rather than later. It's called buy. It's like buy it, but date the rate, just refi lower. Okay. And if you are interested, because I have so many more notes from AEI, which I think are just interesting things, if you're one of my clients, feel free to email me and I'm happy to share that with you. Okay? All right, everyone. This has been a big one, a big update. So many things. But I look forward to another year of we just keep on growing or keep on making it better. New flat rate sheet, new programs, all these great things. And let's see how it goes. Maybe I'll have to give an update because it has been a wild year already and it's only early February. Okay. Have a good one.